I feel I must unburden my soul. My immediate purpose is to place before the world, plainly, succinctly, and without comment, all the events. In their consequences, these events have terrified, have tortured, have destroyed my whole being. My original soul seemed to take flight from my body. A sense of insufferable misery pervaded my soul. True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been. And am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. It is impossible to tell how first the idea entered my brain. But once conceived, it haunted me day and night. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given insult. Object, there was none. Passion, there was none. For his gold, I had no desire. With feeling of deep, yet most singular affection, I regarded the old man. Had the routine of our life been known to the world, we should have been regarded as madmen, although perhaps as madmen of a harmless nature. Our seclusion was perfect. I admitted no visitors. His partiality for myself seemed to increase. I believe the old man loved me as his own son. It is a thought, an odd one, which chills the very marrow of my bones with the fierceness of the delight of its horror. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given the old man cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. why it was. His evident fondness for myself rather disgusted and annoyed. By slow degrees, these feelings of disgust and annoyance rose into the bitterness of hatred. I longed to destroy him with a blow. Yet I was withheld from so doing, let me confess it at once, by some strange dread. It was not a dread of evil, and yet I should be at a loss how otherwise to define it. What was it? What was it that so unnerved me? I think it was his eye. I avoided the eye with a certain sense of shame. But gradually, very gradually, I came to look upon it with unutterable loathing, and to flee silently from its odious presence as from the breath of a pestilence. From my infancy, I was noted for the docility and humanity of my disposition. My tenderness of heart was even so conspicuous as to make me the jest of my companions. Yet I am not sure that my soul lives than I am that perverseness is one of the primitive impulses of the human heart, one of the indivisible primary faculties, or sentiments which give direction to the character of man. Was it this unfathomable longing of the soul to do wrong for the wrong's sake only that urged me to continue and finally to consummate his death? By degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the eye forever. A sense of insufferable gloom pervaded my soul. Yet by slow degrees nearly imperceptible, which for a long time my reason struggled to reject as fanciful, it had at length assumed a rigorous distinctness of outline. For weeks I pondered upon the means of the murder. I rejected 1,000 schemes because their accomplishment involved a chance of detection. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I moved. Slowly. Very, very slowly. So that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. Oh, so cautiously I thrust my head in. It was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into his chamber. would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. Dull, quick sound came to my ears. It was the beating of the old man's heart. For many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. It is impossible to describe or to imagine the deep, the blissful sense of relief which occasioned in my bosom. His eye would trouble me no more. This hideous murder accomplished, I set myself forthwith and with entire deliberation to the task of concealing the body. If still you think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took. I knew that I could not remove the corpse from the house either by day or by night without the risk of being observed by the neighbors. At one period, I had thought of cutting it into minute fragments and destroying them by fire. At another, I resolved to dig a grave for it in the floor of the cellar. Again, I deliberated about casting it in the well in the yard. about packing it in a box as if merchandise, with the usual arrangements, and so getting a porter to take it from the house. Finally, I hit upon what I considered a far better expedient than either of these. The night waned and I worked in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. There was nothing to wash out. The tub had caught all. And in my calculation, I was not deceived. By means of a crowbar, I easily dislodged the planks. I took up 3 from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I relaid the whole structure as it originally stood, with every possible precaution. A sentiment of satisfaction arose in my bosom as I reflected upon my absolute security. Once again, I breathed as a free man. No human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. I went down to open the door with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? I had left no shadow of a clue by which it would be possible to convict or even to suspect me of the crime. There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they had been deputed to search the premises. I welcomed these gentlemen. Secure in the inscrutability of my place of concealment, I felt no embarrassment whatever. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. The guilt of my dark deed disturbed me but little. I looked upon my future felicity as secured. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling. But it continued and gained definitiveness until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. For a moment I experienced all the pangs of suffocation. I became blind and deaf and giddy. Yet the sound increased. And what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. My breast heaved, my knees tottered, my whole spirit became possessed with an objectless yet intolerable horror. I gazed, my brain reeled with a multitude of incoherent thoughts. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides as if excited to fury by the observation of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. It grew louder, louder, louder. Was it possible they heard it not? They heard, they suspected, they knew, making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony, anything is more tolerable than misery. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt a maddening desire to shriek aloud. Every succeeding wave of thought overwhelmed me with new terror. Could I have torn out my tongue, I would have done it. I felt that I must scream or die. And so then, hark! Louder, 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 louder! Villains! Villains! Dissemble no more! I admit the deed! Tear up the planks! Here! Here! It is the beating of his hideous heart.